The Luminary is truly outrageous. Truly, truly, truly outrageous. If you've ever played an RPG and wondered to yourselves, hey, we could be a group of pop stars, it's now easier than ever with the new Luminary class that is now being playtested for Starfinder 2nd Edition. And table-dependent and campaign-dependent, of course, Starfinder classes are largely compatible with Pathfinder. Today, I cover the Luminary playtest, a class that gives everyone in the party a moment to shine. The Luminary can be a competitive video gamer, a fashionista, a pop diva, a star athlete, an actor, or a YouTuber, but one who kicks ass. Who am I? I'm Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'm a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. I've also run Starfinder 2e, which is compatible. Support my Patreon. I don't make money as an attorney. For an explanation as to why, look at the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. So what is the Luminary? Well, first here is its iconic Prisma, who is a fashionista. You manipulate and sculpt hard light to take any shape you can imagine. You can use this ability to bring stories to life or recreate past events. Your spotlight shines on allies and enemies both, bolstering or hindering them. All the while, you infuse magic into the stagecraft of your chosen platform, your subclass, to direct the stage of battle. Before we go into the specific mechanics that might help grasp this class to compare it to two other charisma-based classes. The first is the Envoy class in Starfinder. That class is like a commander giving directives to allies to hone in on a foe and can eventually learn to do other things with their directives. The second class, of course, is the classic Bard from Pathfinder, which uses performances to boost allies and debuff foes and cast spells. Well, the Luminary is like the Envoy in that it's also a martial character. It's trained in martial weapons and advances in proficiency with its attacks the way that other martial characters do. Meanwhile, it's thematically like the Bard in that it's performing, and they can support allies by casting their spotlight on different creatures, and they have focus spells for more powerful spotlights. However, the Luminary is not a full spellcaster like the Bard is. The Luminary has no spell slots. So what does the Luminary get at level 1? First, here is its minor level 1 feature, the ability to create a hard light prop. You can create a simple hard light object that's no larger than a 5-foot cube. They are clearly crude if viewed within 15 feet. It lasts only for a minute or until any creature other than you interacts with it, whichever happens first. Now, what is hard light? It's magical light that can create tangible objects that you can interact with that have physical reality. This is in contrast to holograms that you can create, which are intangible. Any creature that perceives either can easily discern their true nature. Now on to the meat of the class. During your daily preparations, you can assign basic roles to yourself and to all the creatures in your party. These are the basic 8 roles, and you get additional ones with feats. They each give a special effect when the spotlight is shining on them, which we'll get to that. About half of them are positive, and most of the rest are negative. The action role gives a +5 status bonus to speeds. Comedy gives a -1 status penalty to reflex saves. Drama, a -1 status penalty to will saves. Epic means if they critically hit a foe with a strike, that creature is dazzled for 1 round. Horror means that same creature that's critically hit is frightened 1. Irony is interesting. Creatures with this role take a -2 status penalty to their highest saving throw modifier and a +2 bonus to their lowest saving throw modifier, evening them out. Romance makes creatures who attack that person have a -1 status penalty to attack and damage rolls. And tragedy gives that creature a -1 status penalty to fortitude saves. So those are the roles you and your party members have at the start of the day. Now, how does the spotlight work? You control a single spotlight that covers and highlights a creature with a variety of appearances, from a literal spotlight or glowing aura to a shower of rainbow-colored cherry blossoms. You can flavor it however you like. It casts bright light in the space of the target. You spend 1 action to set a spotlight on a creature within 120 feet. This is the action. Then the creature gains the effects of the role assigned to it. Notably, it can move. Whenever that creature who's spotlighted targets another creature with something that takes 1 or more actions, you can, as a free action, transfer it to that target. The reverse is true also. If someone targets the spotlighted creature, you can transfer the spotlight to that creature. Now you're wondering, how do you assign roles to enemy creatures? Well, here is the cast roll action. It takes one action. You just need to be able to observe the creature, and then you can assign it a role. And it says that you need to be able to observe it. Now, I wonder if this keys with the perception rules in Pathfinder. If a creature is invisible, it is hidden to you and not observed. If the designers wanted us to be able to target an invisible creature with a mischance, they need to clarify that. Because there's a feat that we'll see later that you're supposed to be able to assign to an invisible creature. We'll get to that. Meanwhile, your spotlight ends if it stays on a creature from the start of its turn until the end of its next turn. So if it affects 2 of that creature's turns without switching back and forth, it winks out. Meanwhile, assigning a role to a creature does not have a duration, apparently. So those roles that you assign to your party members at the start of the day, you can give them a completely different one for the rest of the day, apparently. It's only the spotlight itself that is temporary. Meanwhile, you can set a spotlight as a free action when you roll initiative. So at the start of every combat, you can decide, hey, the spotlight's on you, fighter, or on me. Meanwhile, your Luminary subclass is called your platform. Here is the first one I'll go over. It's actually last alphabetically. I have my reasons. It's called theater. Whether live theater, a broadcast production, or viral shorts on the infosphere, you know how to draw an audience into your narrative, whether it's a grounded historical piece or a fantastic voyage beyond their imagination. So each subclass gives you an additional ability to your hardlight prop, a skill, a bonus first level class feat. You get a first level class feat already from your class, so you start with 2 class feats, and an initial focus spell. Your props look real unless someone tries to examine it, and they still have to succeed on a check. Their bonus feat is Tragic Protagonist. I found this funny. You use environmental effects like rain and lightning to set the tone, making yourself very dramatic. Each of these level 1 class feats is keyed to a different role and lets you, when you set a spotlight on yourself, give you that role for free. So let's say you have the epic role, and then when combat starts, you get to set a spotlight on yourself as a free action, remember, but you can also give yourself the tragic role as a free action with this feat. Now you may remember that the tragedy role gives you a penalty to your fortitude saves. So why would you want this? Well, this feat makes you immune to that penalty, just like the other feats do with those roles that have penalties. But each of these feats also let you use your performance skill to do something additional. And in this case, you get to use performance to do the feint action, to distract a foe with your thunder and lightning and tragedy, to make them off guard to your next attack. Still, I must say, I don't know if this feat gives you enough for a feat. You can be easily trained in deception, and you're a charisma class, and have a very good deception modifier anyway. Anyway, you also get a focus spell, and these are called, for the Luminary, they're called stagecraft spells. If you're not familiar with Starfinder and Pathfinder 2e, you have a focus point pool of 1 point, usually at first level, if you have a focus spell, and you get to cast your focus spell with it, and with 10 minutes of refocusing outside of combat, you get to get that point back. So it's a rechargeable spell throughout the day. Well, all of the subclasses give you an initial stagecraft spell, which lets you have a second spotlight that you can use specifically to assign some new role with. Also, these spotlights from these focus spells cannot jump from creature to creature. Well, as a theater luminary, you get to cast lead actor. You assign someone the lead actor role. They get a +1 status bonus to anything with a linguistic trait, so if they want to insult somebody with bon mot, they can do so with a bonus. Also, they can perform themselves to pull someone else into the scene. They don't actually physically pull a creature, they just have that other creature in a scene with them, and those two are now off guard to each other. They both are kind of incentivized to attack each other with that offensive advantage. That creature is in a scene with them for 2 rounds, and from my reading, they can pull multiple people, even with the base version of the spell. And everyone in the scene is off guard to each other. This subclass also gives you access to an advanced stagecraft spell that you can get with a level 8 feat. And this one is called Soliloquy. You can target a creature who has a spotlight on them, and when you cast this on them, you get to immediately assign them a role of your choice, and they can, on their turn, soliloquize to the audience about the current situation. They can, once per turn, use the perform action, one action, to get one of these more dramatic effects. You can pause the screen and look at them, but the one I'll highlight is comedy. You can make a creature within 30 feet stunned if they fail their saving throw. Now, they do a fortitude saving throw against your spell DC. So if you have like someone who's not very charismatic or funny who's affected by this, they can soliloquize, but it's your ability to tell a joke, your spell DC that the ultimate target has to resist. This also synergizes with lead actor. If the target is lead actor, you don't have to assign them a different role. They can, when they do their perform action, choose one thing from this entire list. This seems like it'll lead to some fun roleplay moments with a creative player. Also, every subclass gives you access to a greater stagecraft spell with a level 12 feat, and this one has Final Confrontation. You take two creatures who are hostile to each other, and they get a substantial bonus to their defenses against outsiders, and a penalty if they try to attack outsiders. They're incentivized to fight each other. Now, this combines with lead actor from earlier, and you can have multiple creatures, therefore, in this Final Confrontation who have substantial incentive to attack each other only. There are 4 more subclasses. The next one is Contest. Whether it's a trivia contest, vid game marathon, or a gladiatorial event, you know the most beloved contestants aren't always the ones who score the most points, but those who get the audience rooting for them by being grounded, personable, and a little witty. That said, you also know that success in a contest means having an impressive body of knowledge and knowing how to apply it in the right situation. Your skill you get is society. Your props are usually prizes or part of a game, and other creatures can hold them. You gain the Dark Sarcasm class feat. This lets you give yourself the irony roll as a free action when you give yourself the spotlight. And you can use performance to recall knowledge on any creature whom you've already assigned the irony roll to. So there's some hoops you gotta jump through to get this. You need to spend one action to cast a roll to that enemy. But I suppose it's balanced by the fact that you can now use your performance skill to recall information about any creature, no matter what it is. I'm also not quite sure how sarcasm helps you learn about a creature. Maybe someone in the comments can be creative and figure that out. Now, this one's stagecraft spells are kind of fun. The first is Star Contestant. You can give someone the role of being a very lucky contestant in a game show. This base focus spell means that if they fail on a check, any check, it could be an attack roll, a saving throw, then their next attempt to do the same thing will have a +1 status bonus, and that increases at a higher level. The advanced focus spell is fun. It's called Wheel of Superstars. You create an enormous holographic spinning wheel flat on the ground in a 15-foot burst with various strips of text written on it, obviously inspired by a particular game show. A creature, and apparently any creature, including monsters, can try to spin the wheel, and they roll a d6, and 5 of these 6 effects are positive. One of them's a penalty, but the others are good. And naturally, the star contestant can roll twice and choose which result they want. The greater stagecraft spell is called Summon a Friend. This is like Phone a Friend from So You Want to Be a Millionaire. Kind of. When you fail, but don't critically fail a check, you get to create a facsimile of one of your allies who's within 30 feet as a reaction to be there right next to you to help you against that. You get to re-roll the check, basically, with a +2 status bonus. And if you are the star contestant, you can do this even on a critical failure as well. Next is the fashion subclass, the fashionista. You understand that the development and availability of clothing and textiles have driven and shaped the economic development, technological advancement, and social customs of cultures across the galaxy. You know that making it as a fashionista means being bold, brilliant, and beautiful. Well, your skill is crafting, and your props can be worn by yourself or other willing creatures and can function as a disguise kit. Now, this one needs some work because your prop can still be perceived as a knockoff, which is a big faux pas in the fashion world. And also, it can only last 1 minute. So unless you want to suddenly surprise everyone by being nude, I'm not sure what the function of this is. I mean, it could be an effective fashion statement, but I'm not one to comment. Your bonus feat is Radiant Sparkle. You get to give yourself the romance roll, make people attack you a little more reluctantly as a free action when you cast the spotlight on yourself. And also, you get to use performance to make a request to somebody. Your initial focus spell is Trendsetter. You can give the Trendsetter roll. The target can strike a pose and try to distract a foe within 30 feet by forcing that creature, that monster, to do a reflex saving throw. And if they fail, they are forcefully clad in holographic avant-garde fashion, making them clumsy. And it lasts for a whole minute. Now, your ally who's doing this needs to have the spotlight on them and be a trendsetter, obviously. That one's wacky. The next one is the Vogue Catwalk. You get to create an area 15 feet wide and 30 feet long. When a spotlighted creature in the area casts a spell, performs, such as the trendsetter who strikes a pose and tries to put some avant-garde clothing on somebody, or does a strike, they can, as a free action, stride up to half their speed, and if they're trendsetter, their full speed. They can do this once per turn. Also, any creature that moves outside of the runway becomes dazzled for a round, and this affects allies and enemies alike. The greater stagecraft spell is called Strut and Pose. Now, this seems pretty powerful. It's basically the slow spell, but you gotta do it on a creature who's in the spotlight, and it makes the spotlight intensify, and the creature feels the urge to elegantly traverse the battlefield, unable to shake the feelings that failing to do so will trigger the magic flowing around them. So they have to walk their own runway, basically, but against their will. They get a saving throw, but if they fail, then they must do a move action every turn. If they don't, they become slowed 1 for a round. And this is a 1 minute spell effect. If they try to do that move action, they have to do a reflex saving throw, and it has these various effects. It can slow their speed, or if they critically fail, their move action is disrupted and they become slowed 1 for a round anyway, after losing their action. So this is some very flavorful stuff. Next is the music subclass. Music and magic have been inextricably linked since ancient times, and you continue the tradition of entwining those two resonant elements to inspire and astound audiences across the galaxy. You get the diplomacy skill, and your props can create sound, so you can make an instrument. You get the dazzling performance class feat, which is actually a level 2 class feat for the Luminary. You get to spend 1 action, use it once per turn, to perform, and you can force a foe within 5 feet to do a fortitude saving throw, or become dazzled by you. Truly outrageous. Improving your performance skill, which happens automatically as a Luminary, increases the range you can do this. But it negates your own rolls for a round in the meantime. Your initial focus spell is Diva, which turns out to be kind of vanilla. You give the Diva roll, which lets them, once per turn, do the perform action to heal somebody 1 to 4 hit points, which scales as you level up naturally. But it has to be performance. You have to sing or dance. The advanced stagecraft spell is Star Song Recital. This lets you try to fascinate enemies around you, and you do a performance check against the will DCs of each enemy within 15 feet, within 30 feet if you're the diva. And this is not your standard fascinated condition. I have criticisms of the condition in Pathfinder and Starfinder. I think it's too weak. This does more. They spend the first action of each of their turns stepping or striding towards you. They are off guard to anyone who's not under a spotlight. And this condition does not end when someone uses a hostile action against one of their allies. Thank goodness. This lasts a whole minute if you critically succeed. And if you just regular succeed, it still lasts a minute, but they get a new save after each of their turns. Your greater stagecraft spell is Grand Crescendo. Your performance reaches its zenith, and you do sonic damage to every enemy within 30 feet of you, and you give temporary hit points to all your allies in the area. The last subclass is Sports. Physical sports are one of the most popular forms of entertainment in the galaxy, and you know what makes a player into a superstar. After all, the fans don't always cheer for the player who scores the most points or has the best time, but for that special superstar who can hype up the crowd and make them feel like they're part of the action. You get athletics as a skill, and your props can be used as weapons that you can throw. They do 1d4 bludgeoning damage and have the thrown 20 feet trait. You get Stunt Performer as a class feat. You get to give yourself the action roll naturally as a free action when you give yourself the spotlight. And you get to use your performance skill to do high jumps, long jumps, and to grab an edge. You have to be in the spotlight, of course, with this role, as with the other class feats at level 1. Your initial focus spell is Star Player. You get to give the Star Player role to somebody. They get 3 temporary hit points, which does not scale, does not sound like a lot, but the other part is really good. When the Star Player successfully hits a creature with a strike, the creature must do a Fortitude save or be knocked prone, and that's against your spell DC. This lasts a whole minute, and I wonder if it's a little strong. I know there's fighters who can get a feat that let them do a 2-action activity that lets them try to trip a foe if they successfully hit them, but that's like a level 4 feat, and it takes 2 actions. You have to commit to a 2-action activity to do it. Anyway, I'm not complaining because I think this class could be a little stronger than it is in the playtest. I'll say more at the end. The advanced stagecraft spell is called Big Game. You create a facsimile of a sports team that harry and hinder their opponents. You can create a football team, American football team, or a rugby team that just is difficult terrain. And every time you sustain the spell and when you cast it, you get to move the areas and do bludgeoning damage to all the creatures in the areas. It's 2 10-foot bursts. And the Star Player is immune to these effects. The Star Player can be in the middle. The greater focus spell is Grand Slam. If a creature is in the spotlight, you get to cast a spell to let them strike as a reaction. Now, if they're the Star Player, they get to do it as a free action. And they get a +2 status bonus to their attack roll. And if they miss, they get to re-roll the attack without the bonus, but they get basically 2 chances to do this attack roll. Additionally, if the attack hits, they get to, as a free action, demoralize that creature or stride. So if you want to be a Luminary and be a strong melee combatant, this seems like a good subclass to choose where you make yourself the Star Player. I also noticed that none of these focus spells have the Manipulate trait, so they're very rarely going to trigger reactions. Alright, so now what happens when you advance? I felt like it made sense to go through the subclasses first and to go through the mechanics and what you can do with your spotlight for these to make sense. So level 3, Star Maker. Your performance skill auto advances, and you get to set a spotlight as an exploration activity, which honestly, I'm not sure what the tangible benefit of that is, because at the start of an encounter, you get to set the spotlight on somebody as a free action, and you can only have 1 spotlight. Now, as for what those roles can give you during exploration mode, there is only a couple that I found that could be useful, like the one that affects your saving throws or having a bonus to speed. But when you set the spotlight on yourself when you roll initiative, you get to use your performance skill for initiative now. And additionally, you gain this reaction called Spotlight Focus. When a creature starts their turn, you get to use your reaction to transfer the spotlight to them. This also works with your spotlight from your Stagecraft spell. Ronald from the future, I actually don't know how you can do this because the Stagecraft spells that I remember say that you can set a spotlight on a creature and give them that unique role when you cast the spell, but that spotlight cannot move to another creature. So I'm not sure if this actually works with Stagecraft spells. So I think this is contradictory text unless there's something I'm not seeing. If so, please tell me in the comments. So this makes your spotlight more mobile, gives you more flexibility, and lets you affect more things in a given round. As you advance further, I'll note that you become expert in your spells and master in your spells at the same levels that the Magus and the Summoner do, which are bounded spellcasters and not full spellcasters. So I thought that was notable, while you still have the usual progression in your attacks and defenses that other martials get. At level 9, you get Galactic Superstar. Everyone knows who you are, even if they don't know why you're famous. That's so real. But somehow, because you're famous, even though people don't know why you are famous, you can do more damage with your strikes. I don't exactly know how that translates to more damage. Like, Kim Kardashian can do more damage, apparently, because of her social media status. Mental damage, maybe. Level 13 gives you Improv Performer. It gives you an extra reaction that can be only used for Luminary reactions. So, Spotlight Focus, and some of the reactions we'll see from the class feats we'll see in a second. And then level 19, Triple Threat. you basically get a third spotlight. This gives you a second spotlight that works with your basic roles. Now onto the class feats. Now there's actually 44 more class feats, and I don't want to go through all of them. I'll just cover about a third of them. Ones that stood out to me were notable or interesting or seemed strong. A lot of them let you do more things with fewer actions. Basic stuff that wouldn't be very surprising, let's say. At level 4, there are some class feats that give you a reaction, and here's one of them. Blooper. When an enemy in the spotlight critically fails a strike or a reflex save, you get to knock them over and knock them prone. Character acting support. When an ally in the spotlight starts their turn, you get to support them with a reaction, and they are quickened. With that extra action, they can stride or strike. Though I think they should add perform to this list, given how this class is designed, personally. You can only do this once every 10 minutes. Next is Hard Light Squib. When a creature, probably an enemy, in the spotlight is critically hit by an attack, you want to use this to create a tiny burst of hard light shards, giving them bleed damage equal to some number plus your charisma modifier. So at level 4, this would give them 8 bleed damage and can max out at 15. This next feat, Contrasting Chiaroscuro, gives you another role that you can assign with your usual spotlight. You create an extremely bright spotlight so that if the creature was invisible, it becomes concealed instead. If it was concealed, it's no longer concealed. This is why I had my question earlier. What if a foe starts combat invisible? Are you not able to cast a roll on them because you can't observe them? Anyway, that's my rules question for the developers. Level 6, Multi-Platform Luminary. If you are expert in a skill that is given for free by another subclass, you get to gain their initial stagecraft spell. Level 6, On the Air. This one lets you fly as long as you have the spotlight on you. If you lose the spotlight, you start descending at the start of your next turn. This one's fun. Level 8, Adoring Fans. You get the Adoring Fans stagecraft spell. You get to create around whoever is under the spotlight a 10-foot emanation of hard light avatars to celebrate and follow that creature. It follows that creature around, and it serves as difficult terrain for everybody except the spotlighted creature and you. Creatures within the spotlight can hide or sneak as well, so your allies can take advantage of that situation, or your enemies. Also, sadly, any area damage to the spotlighted creature will dismiss the spell. Next is a level 8 feat called Sponsored Ad Break. I'm a sucker for modern cultural references. Now you have to be live streaming, and there is a very cheap item that you can get called a camera bot. It's one of the mini bots that are in this playtest. You initiate an ad break, receiving a gift from a dedicated sponsor and consuming it on the air. A drone delivers a consumable item with an item level no higher than half your level and an activation of 1 action and then leaves. If you receive ammunition, grenades, or spell gems, it must be a 3-action activity. Now, I'm assuming from the action cost and the fact that you can only do this twice per day, that you can choose from the entire list of items, and that you don't need to have it in your inventory. Another level 8 feat is called Trope Deconstruction. You make a character more compelling by reversing the audience's expectations. With a single action, you get to cast a roll and set a spotlight on a creature, and it basically reverses the effect of said roll. It only works on the ones listed, but this is interesting. You can increase one of their saving throws. You can do the opposite of romance and make attacks more accurate and more damaging against that creature. Or this is the one that's interesting to me, irony. If you can flip the irony, then you get to lower their lowest saving throw by 2 and increase their highest by 2. So if you find the lowest saving throw of an enemy, this seems like a strong debuff. At level 10, we get a few feats that give you more basic roles to assign. Chroma Key Stagehand. With your spotlight, you get to obscure the target. This makes the creature invisible. However, if it uses a hostile action, I believe this role immediately ends, and they cannot benefit from this role for the next 24 hours. Costume Wardrobe. You give somebody an outfit that makes them resist a particular kind of physical or energy damage, and it's substantial. You get to, at level 10, you're going to be Master in Performance, and you get to give them resistance 11 to that type of damage. It eventually maxes out to 15. Stage Fright, also level 10. You know how to use sound, light, and even heat to apply extra pressure to your performers. Basically, when they have the pressure roll, the first attack made against them each round, they are off guard to it. However, if they ever roll a critical success, this roll ends and they're immune for 24 hours. Level 12 feat, Hot Set. You overload your spotlight with enough energy to sear not only your star actor, but the set around them. So that creature, probably an enemy, right? You spend 3 actions, they take 96 fire damage, and it creates hazardous terrain around them in a 20-foot burst that lasts for a minute. You can use this once every 10 minutes. Next is Break a Leg, level 16 feat, another role that you can assign. You know how to apply the kind of pressure to a performer that'll make them more likely to screw up when you tell them exactly what to do. So they get the unlucky roll. You verbally goad them into using a particular one of their attacks, like Jaws or a laser pistol. And the first time each round that creature uses that attack, it must roll the attack twice and use the worst result. However, if it hits with this attack, it becomes immune to this roll for the next 24 hours. Level 18, Witty One-Liner. Once per day, when you have no focus points, you come up with a perfect, clever remark. You get to set a spotlight on yourself and regain a focus point. And I just note this because isn't there a level 1 feat for the champion that gives you almost all of this? Sure, setting the spotlight on yourself as a free action saves an action, but this is once per day. I don't know if it should be so high level, level 18, before this is available. Okay, finally, of course, the 2 level 20 feats I'll highlight. First is Effortless Superstar. You are permanently quickened, and you must use that extra action to cast roll, perform, set a spotlight, or stride. So stride or your basic luminary actions. And perform can key off of your stagecraft spells. Lastly, the world is a stage. Once per day, you can cast any occult spell of 8th rank or lower as an innate spell. So very vanilla, but gives you access to a huge variety of effects that you can use once per day in the right situation. All right, so closing statement. Some closing thoughts on this playtest class. First of all, we have 2 months to give commentary on the class, and I'll have a link in the description to where you can do so. So I was just looking online and thinking about how this class would play. Because you have 2 class feats at level 1, and you can assign yourself a role during your daily preparations and change that role at any time, you basically can start every combat with one of 3 roles of your choice. The one you have before combat started, and one from one of the 2 level 1 feats that give you that role for free when you set the spotlight on yourself. Also, I thought it was interesting that when you set the spotlight on an ally and they perform, they basically use your performance ability. It was a little thematically weird, but I thought it was also funny that a soldier clad in armor can strike a pose and cause enemies to be distracted by that and by the garish clothing they now wear. I do think, though, that this class, while very high in flavor, might be a little low on the power end of things, because I'm thinking of the 2 classes that it is inevitably going to be compared to. The Envoy and the Bard each have level 1 class features that buff the whole party's ability to attack, well, one foe in the case of the Envoy, or any foe in the case of the Bard. And attack rolls are the most common checks made in the game. And these 2 characters can affect the entire party's attack rolls. Additionally, the Bard has full spellcasting, has 3 spell slots at every rank. I guess we'd have to see the Luminary in play. The Luminary is able to transfer the spotlight from creature to creature over the course of a round as a free action, so long as the trigger is met. Which, if party members want to share the spotlight with others, they'll have to perhaps set aside an action to share the spotlight, to pass the torch on, to do battle medicine or cast guidance on somebody, or I don't know, give them a clap on the back of encouragement, setting up that ally doing something. However, most of the roles that are provided by default buff active abilities. They're like reactive, with the exception maybe of the couple roles that impose a debuff when you critically hit, but those obviously aren't gonna be very frequent. Anyway, this is a playtest class, and Paizo tends to make playtests substantially weaker, I guess, to test concepts before they make the final version. They usually buff it for the final version and add more options. Another thing I want to say is that this class is a bit more complex. Several times while drafting my script and recording this video, I was confusing the action costs of setting the spotlight and casting a roll. I was thinking that the Luminary can set a spotlight on itself for free in the middle of combat, but no, they can cast a roll on themselves for free if they have a class feat that lets them do so, if they spend an action to set the spotlight on themselves. However, doing that does get easier at level 3 when you get to use your reaction to set the spotlight on yourself at the start of your turn if it's not on you. But it does use your reaction. Which, by the way, I looked up the order of operations. You regain a reaction at the start of your turn, yes, but that is the last step of starting your turn. So you have to have not spent a reaction yet for you to be able to use Spotlight Focus to transfer the spotlight to yourself. And in addition, you have to also probably do some bookkeeping to track who has what role in the group. You have 8 roles to choose from, and each of your party members, let's say you have a party of 5 creatures, has one of those roles at any given time and could potentially have one of the other roles assigned to it at any given time. You have a lot of flexibility with them. And on top of that, of course, you have to track who is the spotlight on, and you can have 2 spotlights and eventually 3 spotlights at once. So as you can see, it's a little complicated and a little clunky, and I hope this can become, that playing this class will feel more streamlined and intuitive before the final release. So that's my coverage of the Luminary. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Support my Patreon if you haven't already. It gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. Also join the Rules Lawyer Discord. There are over 6,000 of us. I hang out there a lot. We talk Pathfinder 2e and Starfinder 2e and other gaming. We also have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system to play Pathfinder 2e called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. See you next time.